Hey guys, Palpatine here. Today we're gonna deep dive into the tower, QiongJiu. Shout out to Mario for this nickname. I love it. She's one of the characters you can get from the 50 pull beginner banner, so I imagine some players probably got her. Plus, I've been seeing a lot of people say they were rerolling for her. QiongJiu's overall rating is a 77.7 based on the weighting of the chart, which we'll break down. Even though she's rank 4 on our overall rankings list, which we have a video about that, so check out that video if you're interested, link in the description below. Honestly, the ranking is so close, and QiongJiu could easily be top 3 in the right situations. QiongJiu's obviously like super strong in 1v1 single target situations due to her high stacking modifiers. But where she really shines is on highly positional maps, using her support attacks to very quickly reduce the number of enemies. For example, you can park QiongJiu like in the middle of the map behind a cover, then run your other teammates around the map picking off various enemies with QiongJiu support attacks. One thing to note though is that for super weak mobs that can be killed by one hit with like any of your teammates anyway, in those situations QiongJiu's support attacks become kind of wasted. This is more apparent for some of the newer bosses they released in the CN version, where the boss would constantly summon these little like minions. These minions are super weak, but he'll summon like 3 or 4 of them every turn, so you have to keep killing them off. But the problem is, they're so weak that anybody could one-shot them anyway, so you don't really need QiongJiu's follow-up support attack. Situations like that is not super rare. They do happen regularly, so we can't really say QiongJiu is good at every scenario. But don't get me wrong, any map where your other teammates can't one-shot all the mobs, plus all the story pushing weekly bosses and later on guild bosses, QiongJiu is super OP. For skills, she gets a 90 points. Most of her damage is actually physical. Even though her skill 2 and 3 are burn damage skills, the damage isn't really much compared to her support attacks times 4. Her skill 2 is pretty simple. 150 modifier burn damage that gives the support boost buff. This support boost buff increases your support attack by 15% and further increases damage to exposed enemies, which means enemies not in cover, by another 10%. So one thing to note is this support boost buff is different from the one you get from her weapon called Golden Melody. That weapon, it has a buff to the damage of your support attacks separately. So those two buffs will actually stack with one another. For skill 3, it's an 8 tile straight line attack that hits the first target. And she also has a fixed key that makes it hit all the targets in that line and applies 2 turns of overburn. Sharkri is a good partner for her in the beginning, and Sharkri is a 4-star character, so likely lots of people have her. Next is QiongJiu's skill 4 ultimate. There's not too much to it. This is her bread and butter. When your CI is full, CI is short for Confectance Index. So when your CI is full, you get 4 charges of support boost to apply to 4 support attacks. When you pop the ult without full CI, then you only get 3 charges. Her passive gives her 1 CI every time she deals damage. So all of her support attacks will recover CI for her. So when you're doing bosses, you want to make it so that every round, QiongJiu can pop her ult at full CI, and then recharge CI to full by the next round so you can rinse and repeat. So the question is, when do you use the ult and when do you use her skills 2 and 3? Well, when you know you can hit your support attacks 4 times, then you pop the ult. If you look at the situation, you're like, I can only support attack maybe once or twice this turn, then it's probably better to just use your skill 2 and 3 to DPS yourself. For guild bosses later on, you have parties of 5, so you pretty much will be popping ult on QiongJiu every turn. It's so OP. Next is stats. She gets 85 points. The only thing preventing her from going into the 90s is her base 5 movement, which I guess 6 movement would be a little greedy. It'd be too good. So you could consider letting her equip that common key from Diane, which is a future character. That common key gives +1 movement every other turn, which is situationally good for QiongJiu. So you kind of get the idea behind the design of this character. They probably decided to give her 5 mobility because they don't want her to, start out positioning to one side of the map, clear that side, and then run all the way to the other side in like 1 turn and then start clearing the other side. It'd just be too powerful. For gear and attachment synergy, 85 points, not much to say here. You just want to use either the ballistic boost for your attachment or the fire boost. For stability damage, she gets 55 points. A little bit of a failure here because most of her stability damage actually comes from her support attacks, and each hit only removes 2 stability. It's kind of low, considering, even early on, we're seeing bosses with 20 plus stability charges. But relative to other DPS characters, she is a good stability breaker, because if you do get 4 support hits like onto the boss, then that's 2 times 4 is 8. So, good, but just not a specialist. For stability recovery, 0 points, nothing to be said here. She's a DPS, and beat DPSs don't have that. For her keys, she'll mostly use just her own universal key, which essentially gives her support attacks 7% more damage and 5% more crit. For fixed keys, you want Delicious Sharing. It's the one that gives 3 CI at the beginning of the battle. That's a must for bosses. Another one you must have is the one that applies defense debuff before you land your support hits. The reason this key is so broken for QiongJiu is because the debuff actually lands before your teammate even lands their hit. So say your ally attacks the boss, before their hit lands, QiongJiu would already apply this defense debuff. So your ally actually does extra damage, then QiongJiu does her support attack for even more damage. Another one that's super good for bossing later on is the key that cleanses 1 buff from the boss with each support attack. So let's say like a super late game boss has like 5 crazy buffs. With this fixed key and QiongJiu, you can just get rid of all their buffs in 1 round. It's just crazy good. For popularity, she gets 75 points. She's not quite as popular as characters like maybe Suomi or Macchiato in China. Nevertheless, she's quite popular amongst Chinese players due to her appearances in the story. Something I will say though, is that I feel like Chinese players definitely don't chase the meta as hard as global players in general. And Girls Frontline 2 is designed in such a way to always allow players to pull their favorite characters and not be completely screwed on content. And the beauty of this game is in its versatility of team building, right? So you can make a lot of random weird comps work. Even though you might not like be, topping the charts, it's better to play with characters that you really enjoy playing with, right? For usage rate, she gets 100 points because again, if you pulled her, you're gonna use her in pretty much everything. Even the maps where she's not good on, you're probably gonna wanna put her in first, try it, and then realize like, oh crap, this map sucks for her, and then you swap her off, right? So that concludes the deep dive for QiongJiu. I think next I'm gonna start doing some 4-star characters that most people are probably gonna have at this point, like Ksenia, Sharkry, and Kalfne. Okay, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.